Working from home has been the norm for many of us, well, most of us for the past 3 years. While that has been fulfilling in some ways, it can be really isolating and lonely experience for many people.
Yeah.
We're hearing the need for community has never been more critical for individuals and teams. I'm Samantha Jung, Vice President of Marketing for Steelcase, and today I'm with Rosie Oliver from Woods Bagot, Singapore. Hi Rosie, good to see you.
Hi Sam.
Tell us a little bit about Woods Bagot and the studio in Singapore.
Okay, so Woods Bagot, we're a global studio. We operate across 17 different locations, around about 1,000 people globally. We are one of the oldest architecture firms originating from Australia. Our business covers master planning, architecture, and interiors, and we have a number of different sectors and a huge insight of specialism within those sectors as well. The Singapore studio here, we're nicely located between Northern Asia and the Hong Kong, Asia, China business, and Australia to the south of us, and so we benefit from both sides of the business. Our studio here in Singapore, we do have a really a big strength in terms of workplace design across workplace and interiors and architecture.
Steelcase latest global results have really talked about employees expecting a better work experience as they return to the office and to really entice more employees to come back to the office. And it has been challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what are some of the trends and stories that you're hearing from your clients?
Yeah, we've started to look with our clients around different ideas around the workplace and what the physical workplace needs to fulfill. It's an ecosystem of work. It's not that we come to the office 9 till 5 days a week. It is a multitude of different experiences and places, people and constructs. And so the workplace needs to adapt and respond to that. It also needs to respond to, as you describe, there's this shift between this concept of obligation versus destinational. So we see that, many of our clients are working in varying forms of hybrid working at the moment. And as part of that, they're not mandating that staff actually come to the physical workplace in some instances. And so the question then becomes around what creates this desire and what creates this sense of destination? What does the physical workplace offer that remote working can't? And that's where we see innovation and deeper understanding in terms of workplace, how we design for workplace to elevate that experience for employees. So we talk about better, not bigger. So it's not about how much real estate, it's not about the quantity of desks, it's really about the quality of that experience. The physical workplace has the benefit of naturally being multisensory, creating naturally immersive environments, and it brings people together. And those are the things that we're focusing on when we're looking at building up the social and community and collaborative settings of the workplace.
I like what you said about bringing people together, whether they are teams that work closely with each other,
Right.
or even in the pre-COVID world, we talk about the water cooler moment, that
Exactly.
spontaneous moment where you're socializing and maybe some amazing spark happens at the water cooler. And I think on the side also you hear a lot in the news about the great vaccination.
Right.
And and the fact that you mentioned disconnect between employees and the company and the culture.
Yeah.
What are you hearing more about companies acting on this
Acting on this.
insight that
Yeah.
many people are feeling this
Yeah.
engagement issues?
Yeah.
And,
So as you mentioned, the water cooler moment, people are missing that because it was spontaneous and part of a natural rhythm of a day. What we found during COVID was this big disruptor, basically, to the way that we work and the kind of constructs that form work for us. And the sort of the urge or the temptation to make work more transactional. I think that's been one of the downfalls of the way that remote working has fallen into that trap. And many people have found themselves in back-to-back meetings from sort of 8 to 8, And then, people are talking about Zoom fatigue, literally this kind of fatigue, because the natural balance and boundaries of the day aren't kind of set. And I don't know anyone, if you do, who schedules a 10-minute water cooler moment in their day, to talk about, well, what was the football results, or what are you doing at the weekend? We don't do it, even though we could do it.
Yeah.
And so we're missing out on that, and that's a big part of work, those spontaneous interactions. Since the 1960s, the whole open plan office idea has gained momentum gradually, and the reason for that is that it breaks down hierarchies. It brings different teams, different thought patterns together. So it kind of encourages diversity. And diversity is key. The sort of non-linear thought process of diversity is important in creating innovation. So when we talk about the water cooler moments, it's not just about sense of belonging and worthiness and social aspects. It's also about the way that innovation creates, more than 20 years ago, Larry Page identified that people who eat together create together. And that's, underpinned the sort of Google business model. And many, many businesses appreciate that. There's an increasing appreciation of social capital. Social capital, is a form of currency of businesses. And so when we come to the physical workplace, how can we improve that? We see clients redistributing between social, collaboration, and focus settings. So a larger distribution towards the social and collaborative nature of the work setting.
I like what you said about, it's very hard, and we all experience this, that, on Teams or Zoom, and whichever, virtual conferencing vehicle you use, it's been very difficult to say. I remember in early days in the pandemic, it seems not far away, people were organizing like happy hour on Zoom. And, for some of us who work remotely, right, like maybe you have colleagues in Sydney or Shanghai or, New York for that matter, and trying to get together that way felt a little bit forced. Right? It was a bit fun for once or twice, and then I think we all stopped. I think there was some coffee hour or things like that. It's just not the same when you're not face to face. So I think, that's definitely some of the downside of that virtual collaboration that didn't work.
And coming together to create those communities, it does, as you say, it's about sense of belonging, it's about sense of purpose. So many colleagues would relate to me, they missed simple things such as having lunch together, coming together and sort of sharing wins and losses, successes and failures. It's about creating memories together, creating moments, and that's what makes us inherently human, right? And it's the bigger picture of what makes work.
Interesting, right? After all, you work with other people. So
exactly.
It's good to have shared memories and shared wins. I love that. And I think also during this period of time, if you were a new joiner, it was even more challenging because you couldn't hear those stories organically.
Absolutely. And there's sort of learning, a lot of learning that happens just through observation and immersion. And for new starters, that can be challenging. Onboarding people, a lot of businesses talked about the sort of new and the old teams, the people that had been there for a long time and new people coming on board, and how to best integrate them, and they find their place within the tribe, so to speak.
And I think management time and getting sort of airtime with leaders, if your paths cross and just happen to have lunch together, was also, other elements of that social life in the office.
That's right.
And so I think just thinking more deeply about design, we know that, obviously we've established that, clients are looking into upping the ante on social and creating that community feel, inspiring people to come home, feeling that sense of belonging. Then, what is the opportunity for clients today? Some of you may be thinking about downsizing. Maybe you feel like you don't need so much space because many people are you have adopting more hybrid policies.
Right.
Are you seeing that trend? I mean, people are drastically changing their policies?
Interestingly, that there is definitely an investment in workplace strategy and understanding what's right for the business, and there's no one size fits all, so it's very, very dependent on the nature of the business. The majority of clients we see are sort of chartering territories of hybrid and understanding what that means, because it is still relatively new for us. So understanding the type of work that is best suited to remote, and then how we spend the time and how we collaborate when we come together, and how we can optimize that collaboration experience, and I think elevating the experience of the office as well. So improving all nature of things from materials to lighting to seamless integration of technology, convenience, smart building, and so on. Biophilia, there's been a greater appreciation of how impacted we are in terms of health and wellness in the workplace as well, and a responsibility from employers to improve that as well. So I think it goes back to that idea that it's become more about quality than quantity. So while some clients are maybe downsizing, not all, there's just a recalibration of the space and investment on the space and the way that they want to encourage people to come back to the office and set them up for successful collaboration when they come to the office as well.
Yeah, I think, pre-COVID, some leading organizations have already increased that third space dramatically on the floor plate, that you could quantify that it took a third of the space. And the only way that was possible financially is that, a lot of these organizations had adopted hybrid work, or in sometimes we call it activity-based working, and that made this more possible. But that was not something everybody was doing. But if your organization was thinking about less is more, downsizing, what other quality spaces can we provide in exchange for removing workstations and rows of benches that nobody needs anymore? Isn't that great? And so, what are some of the thinking behind? Again, I remember, I keep saying pre-COVID, we had clients that had gaming room, dartboards, billiard table, and all sorts of unusual things that was great for Instagram. But, what are some of your tips and advice if somebody says, okay, I really want to improve that social spaces?
I think, one client, I won't mention the name, but one key client that we've been working in the tech sector, we've been looking at a pilot study, and that's been really interesting, because what we do see is that there is a more openness and willingness for companies to listen to staff, so engage with staff and understand their requirements, and then incorporate that within the workplace. Part of that process and one of the sort of driving values of this company was around diversity and inclusion. And so a big part of this was when we looked at collaborative settings where people came together, it was about how to create a multi-channel experience. So if we're saying that people can work from anywhere, then the idea was that anyone, anywhere, could call into a collaboration space that was happening in the office. So then the AV and the technology integration becomes key, making that as seamless as possible. We created campfire settings so that people would sit in a sort of round setting, and they would be facing each other, and the cameras would be voice activated and speakers motion detected and so on. And so that created this sort of idea that you are physically in the room with people. So definitely we've seen an investment in work settings, variety of work settings, spaces that allow people to come together seamlessly, AV integration as well. Event spaces is another one as well, and the flexibility, obviously, flexibility is a key word for event spaces and social spaces to be able to transform. Some companies, we've looked at what might have been enclosed office spaces, and we've looked at how the furniture and the setup of that space can transform into a collaborative setting when the office or the person that owns that office is not there. So those are the things that our clients are considering, and a sort of broader appreciation of the setups and the ways and the nature and the variety how people can come together. Yeah.
I love what you kind of describe in terms of a seamless experience that has technology integration in a very purposeful way.
Right.
I mean, in the pre-COVID, a lot of us would say, okay, I'm gonna fly to Sydney and
Exactly.
see you, and that's gonna be less and less. I think air travel obviously is recovering.
Yeah.
That's fantastic, but
Yeah.
I think the habit now stays that I'm gonna do a call first before I might get an air ticket. And I think this idea of balancing mixed presence, as you say, having virtual as well as face-to-face interaction in the office is still something we continue to have to support and to get better at.
Yeah.
And so that's one area that is evolving.
Yeah.
And so as it comes to the social spaces, I really like what you talk about. It's multi-purpose. I mean, even in Steelcase, I mean, it's a unique example, but a lot of our cafe areas double down as town hall spaces, double down as event spaces, and so that flexibility that you mentioned is really critical.
It's really key, and I think in this process it's still a process of discovery, so there's a lot of testing, trialing, prototyping of things, and what's exciting for us as designers is that most people are accepting that we don't have all the answers, but that we're willing to try, and in that process we're maybe willing to fail. So I think flexibility around the various different setups is almost like a future proofing. So if this doesn't work, how can we reconfigure it? How can we make our space work really, really hard for us so it can transform from A to B? So that's where the flexibility becomes key. It supports that innovation and that testing and piloting of different things.
As many clients are thinking about doing something different for their social spaces, what are some design considerations or new ideas that our clients should be thinking about?
We see a focus around collaboration settings, so diversity and collaboration settings, and supporting hybrid working as well. So AV integration within collaborative settings so that people can call in and be part of a physical meeting wherever they are in the world. And then I think the other key factor is around flexibility and adaptability, so that the work settings can grow and change and can transform from office spaces to collaboration spaces, from event spaces to social spaces. So it's the flex nature, and the furniture can support those settings as well. I think even the nature of the ergonomics around furniture is important as well. So in a more relaxed setting, such as here, where people are sitting at a slightly lower level to have informal conversations together, is very helpful. And then here we have a sort of 10 to 15 minute conversation. You wouldn't stay in this space for a long time, so it encourages people to move and switch to a different variety and different setting.
I like what you mentioned about kind of and that diversity is so critical, that whether your employees are looking for that short burst of social or collaboration, or both, or having a longer discussion in the open space, in the social space. It's all about choice. I think what we're hinting is that, even in the social areas, there will also be collaboration. So we're not trying to distinguish
drawing the boundary between
two.
that as well, and there are crossovers as well. And I think that's been part of our process, is acknowledging the crossovers between those, the social and the collaborative, how a collaborative setting can spontaneously turn into a social setting and people start laughing and they're being more informal. And that's natural for us to behave in that way. And so supporting that in our design and our setups is a positive thing.
Absolutely. Diversity is really king in serving sort of this new needs for employees to have different work modes. And so we know Woods Bagot has many offices across Asia Pacific and around other parts of the world.
Yes.
And so what's keeping the team busy? Does the Singapore studio work mainly for Singapore?
Yeah, we're Southeast Asia. We cover the whole Southeast Asia region from here. And we're closely connected with our global business. So we are a global studio, around about 1,000 people globally. We originate out of Australia, so we have a very strong presence in Australia, and that's spread to Asia as well. We're quite fortunate in Singapore that we're placed strategically, so we benefit from both what's happening in the North Asian market, as well as the thought leadership around workplace that's really driven out of our Australia business. So we are very busy, which is a good thing. And that is, been consistent through the last 2 to 3 years as we've supported clients through this process of transition. And the process of transition requires reinterpretation and designing for change. So that keeps us very, very busy. So, it's an exciting time for us as a business. We're working with lots of different companies across Asia. Not just from workplace interiors, but also workplace architecture as well. So we work with a number of key developers, looking at public spaces of commercial developments, looking at the porosity and connection to community at a sort of broader scale of things as well. So yeah, future's bright.
Great to hear that
you.
The design community is busy, and that just tells us there's a lot of growth in the Asia Pacific region.
Right.
And I think Australia has always been very interesting as
Yes.
a little outlier of the Asia Pacific market,
Right.
if you will, and always leading with activity-based work since many years. And what do you think might happen in the post-COVID world? Because there is already so much hybrid policies in place. Do you think people will dial that up or dial it down?
I'm not going to pretend to have the answer to that. I don't know. What I find interesting is the process of discovery through that. So supporting clients through that and making sure that it's comfortable and it's right and it's adaptable for their companies to grow and learn. Activity-based working, it's been commonplace for some companies for the last 15 years. So what's been interesting for us in Woods Bagot, we've been supporting companies to transition to Agile for many years now. And then COVID's been a great accelerator to that for a much broader base of companies who may have gone from one-to-one and now are considering hot desking, agile working, activity-based, combination of remote and virtual. So yes, in all honesty, I don't have the answer, but I'm interested in finding out and working together with our clients to find out.
That's exciting, and I like the fact that you mentioned it's not one size fits all. Everybody is different, and even within the same organization in different countries, you have different teams and different individuals that make up that locality. So I think we will wait and see, but it's definitely exciting times ahead. In the social spaces, and I even go back to a personal experience I had in the Ace Hotel in New York. You know how everybody. This is long time. It's been an established example of kind of co-working, social community space. And do you see some emerging trends or signals that beyond just the cafeteria where people eat? That social space is actually doubling as something else to serve that multi-purpose needs of teams or the organizations at large.
Absolutely, and I think there's the sort of comfort factor around the social, more informal settings that allow people to relax and ideas to kind of create. And we see a lot of blurring. So there's a lot of blurring across different sectors. Within our business, we have various different specialisms, but what we're finding is that we're having more and more crossovers. So between hospitality-driven spaces to social-driven spaces to F&B restaurants, cafes, our expertise across those sectors are really coming to play because we're seeing this sort of hybridizing. And so that's interesting for me, the crossovers and the reinterpretation. And many offices now are leaning away from the conventional corporate setup of a sort of office. I look at your setup here, it's the absolute opposite of a conventional office setup. It could be a cafe, it could be, an office, hotel lobby, or so the reinterpretation is interesting.
I think there is a great opportunity for hospitality, learnings from the hospitality sector to flow more, even more into the office design. And we talk about resi-commercial, how the spaces get more residential, and in a way to make that space worth your commute away from home, it still has to feel like home and a living space for employees, and to serve that multi-purpose needs for teams and individuals. I think many teams do have working lunches, working coffees during the day. So getting a social space, a community space is really beyond just serving the nutritional need.
And I think the comfort factor is important as well. So the psychological sort of security that comes from people feeling comfortable, that ultimately improves productivity and effectiveness. And so interesting for us as a business, we're actually in a shop house, and we found that whole typology has kind of benefited us coming out of COVID, because there is already this sort of residential, softer, more comforting factor of the space. And people have been happy to come back and work in the studio in the various different setups that we have in the studio.
Well, thanks, Rosie, for joining us today and sharing so many great examples and tips. And we hope this has been helpful. Just remembering, getting your employees back, it's really helping them to feel a sense of belonging, and pulling them back to, encouraging people back to the office is really, having that really inspiring communal space where people want to come to enjoy and meet others in the office.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you.